Hello and welcome to this demonstration about how to configure IMAP access in Enterprise Vault 11. So we're going to start our demonstration on the Enterprise Vault server, and what I'm going to do is to load up Windows Explorer. And I'm going to go to the Enterprise Vault Programs directory. And I'm looking for this file, IMAP Notification Email Viewer. This is a file that enables me to view the notification message and make any changes to the HTML within that message. So I need to load the template file, which I can find in the Mailbox Messages folder and then the appropriate language. So I'm looking for English. It's called imapenable.html. So in this box in the top box I can edit the HTML, and then I can see the results of that in the viewer in the bottom. So this is how the message will look in the email client. So I don't need to make any changes to this. I'm just going to close this template viewer. And what I do need to do is to copy the message from the Enterprise Vault Languages folder. So go to Languages, and then Mailbox Messages, and then English. Find the imapenable.html, copy that, and I'm going to paste that into this folder. This is the Enterprise Vault Programs folder. That's required for the message to be sent. It's that same concept as for the Exchange Mailbox message for standard Exchange Mailbox archiving. So now I'm going to go to the Enterprise Vault admin console. And I'm going to start on the site properties. And go on to the Advanced tab. And what I wanted to show you here is this IMAP folder limit. So by default, the maximum number of items that can be in a single IMAP folder is 10,000. If you significantly increase this, it's going to have a profound effect on the performance of your Enterprise Vault server. So just be very careful with that. So what I'm going to do now is to expand client access and then go to IMAP. To expand this, right click, go to properties. And in here I can define the endpoint. So I want to define first of all my IMAP endpoint. And put in the EV server alias. In this particular demonstration, I'm going to use a standard unencrypted connection. In the production environment, you really do want to use SSL. So at this point, in order to be able to save the endpoint, you do need to add a server certificate here, and needs to be in a particular format. So there is an executable to enable you to create that particular formatted file that you can search for when you click the add button. And when I click OK, it's going to ask me, do I want to assign this endpoint and start it straight away, and I want to do that. So it's actually assigned it to evserver.example.com. I also want to define an SMTP endpoint. So this is server1.example.com. I'm going to use for this the standard TCP port 25, and I'm not going to use encrypted connections here. I'm going to say it requires authentication, and for this, the sender email address, I'm actually going to use what I'm already using for the system mailbox for Exchange archiving. The reason why that's a really good idea is because I've already configured send as permissions on this mailbox for the Vault service account. So now I've defined those endpoints, I need to assign those endpoints to the particular users, and I can do that by using a policy and then creating a provisioning group. So the policies, obviously if I'm under policies and then IMAP, I want to create a new policy. I'm just going to standard name in this case, IMAP policy, and specify the endpoint. Well, I've only got one IMAP endpoint in this case. I want to notify, so I want to send out a notification email. And then the SMTP endpoint, once again I've only got one, so I'll need to use that one and create the policy. Then I need to create a provisioning group. So under client access, expand IMAP, and you'll see the client provisioning groups node, and then go to Exchange Mailbox, right click and go provision new provisioning group. So I need to give this a name. I want to enable users for IMAP, and I'm going to use that policy, the single policy I've already created. Then I need to specify my targets, but before that I need to add a domain. So I'm going to add my example domain, and then from here I'm actually going to, in this case I'm just going to assign it to a single user. So in the real world I'm going to probably use either a group or maybe an LDAP filter. So I'm going to allocate it to this user called Chris Johnson. So I'm going to add him in there and click OK. And in order for this to be provisioned, it needs a special provisioning task. It doesn't use the standard one for Exchange Mailbox archiving. It creates a new one called the Client Access Provisioning task. It's going to create that on my EV server. So once I've created that provisioning group, now the client access provisioning task will have been created. So if I expand under my server, go to tasks, and you can see that the task is there. It's currently stopped. So I'm just going to change the reporting to full reporting, and then I'm going to start that task. Now that it's started, I can run it, and I'm going to run it in normal mode. So this is going to provision my user, and it takes a couple of minutes to run. So to see whether it's run successfully, the easiest way is go back into my Enterprise Vault Programs directory and find the reports folder. So you'll notice I've now got a folder for client access provisioning, and there's my report. And this is good news. It's enabled this user, Chris Johnson, and it said the notification has been sent. So you can see number of users enabled for IMAP during this run, 1. One more thing that I want to show you is to look at the properties of the archive. So let's expand archives and go to Exchange Mailbox Archive and go to Chris Johnson's archive. What I wanted to show you is that on the Advanced tab, you'll notice that fast browsing is already enabled. Prior to this demonstration, I'd already enabled his archive so that we didn't have to wait for that to happen. If it hadn't already been enabled, then the index administration task would have created a subtask to process the archive, and that can take some time to complete. So let's now go to the Exchange server because I want to show you the configuration within Exchange. So this is the Exchange server, and I've already got the Exchange Management Console open. So under Server Configuration and then Hub Transport. You'll notice that there are actually two receive connectors. And the one that we're going to look at is the client receive connector. This is the one that we're going to use from the mobile client to connect to the server to relay through it. So let's see how that is configured. So it's recommended that for authentication that we just have transport layer security switched on and then have basic authentication switched on. And then for permission groups we just have Exchange users configured. This particular receive connector is listening on TCP port 587. So what I'm going to do now is switch to the client VM. In this demonstration I can't actually show you connecting using a mobile client. So what I'm going to do is instead to use Windows Live to mimic what we would have to configure on a mobile client. So we're now on the client, and first of all what I want to do is to go into Outlook and show you that a welcome message has been received to tell Chris Johnson he's been enabled for access using IMAP client. And this is the most important piece of information required to log on, is the username. Obviously we also need to know the incoming IMAP mail server and the outgoing SMTP mail server as well. So we're going to use Windows Live, and what we need to do is to complete the details for the email account. So first of all we need to enter the email address. And the password and a display name. And I want to manually configure the server settings. So I'm going to choose the protocol IMAP and enter in here the EB server name. Use port 143, and this is where we need to put in the logon username. Which is the domain backslash the username backslash that number, which is 115. Enter in the Exchange server address. And here we're going to use port 587, as I showed you on the receive connector, and we're going to say it requires SSL, which is TLS, and requires authentication. So we click finish, and now hopefully it's going to download all the archived emails, and as you can see they're now visible. If I open one of these, you'll notice that I can see the contents of the email. Now the way that Windows Live actually handles the properties of the outgoing server, I need to change something. So I'm going to do that in under servers. I'm going to go into settings here and say log on using my Active Directory logon. So once I've done that, if I open up an email and click reply, type in my reply and click send. And you'll notice it's actually sent that message successfully We're not getting an error in the bottom right hand corner, so that's all gone okay. So that outgoing message has been relayed through the Exchange server successfully. So that brings us to the end of this demonstration of how to configure IMAP access in Enterprise Vault 11. Thank you for listening.